Welcome back, and you are watching K24 Evening Edition, and we are in this other end of the studio, and with me is Omunga, who is actually the managing partner at Triple O Associates, just to talk a little bit about how you can patent your business idea and also your innovation and steps to patent your idea. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Well, we can start from where Maurice left, where he says that he had several innovations, but because he had not patented, he has seen it being stolen or there has been issues of theft.
Sure.
How do you go about when it comes to patenting your idea?
Thank you very much, Carol. First of all, I would wish to commend Maurice. Maurice is a tremendous individual that actually, if we can just leverage on what Maurice is doing, we can unlock multiple avenues out there for business and even to driving entrepreneurship. The most important thing that we need to identify with intellectual property is that intellectual property is actually an enabler in business. One of the most lacking components in growing entrepreneurship, not only in Africa, but actually all over the world, is that intellectual property is this growing ground from whereby every other industry comes from. So even before we begin defining patents and the patenting processes, it's very important that first of all, we get it right. What is intellectual property? Because if you don't understand a thing, then 9 out of 10 misuse can actually be very prevalent. So intellectual property is the creation of the human mind with an interest of commercialization. So then that means that whatsoever an individual can think about, whatsoever an individual can come and can frame from the workshops of our own minds, then an industry should come out of that product, an industry should come out of that thought that one has put out there. What most entrepreneurs are lacking is the ability to identify that this thing that I've come up with, how far can it go? And that's why by most of us, we are in this space of, is this idea or is that idea? So a patent, to answer you, Carol, a patent is a recognition that the government awards an individual for you coming up with an invention. An invention is coming up with something that puts in place a unique process of either service delivery or coming out with a process of doing something.
Okay.
Yes.
But if we can go by step, maybe you can go back a little bit and
Yes.
look at, maybe you have, yes, as you've said, this business idea or this
Yes.
innovation.
Yes.
You have proof of concept. At what point now do you go and say, now, this is the right time now to patent?
The first point, from the first point, because if an idea is unique, then that means that that idea in itself is currency. That idea in itself is a seed that has a potential of putting in place an entire market out there. So from the onset of you identifying that this thing is actually unique, one of the most forgotten elements of intellectual property is the idea that this thing that I have is actually proprietary. Proprietary is not a big word. Proprietary is actually a simple word that means something that has an element of ownership. The idea and the operation and how that idea functions, within it are very many components that actually you can attach claim to.
Okay,
Yes.
but what are the steps, Mr. Omuga? Maybe
Yes.
you can elaborate for us.
Yes.
Maybe to ensuring that this idea, maybe it's patent. Do I go to a lawyer? Do I go to which agency do I go to ensure that maybe I can have maybe a firm authority over that this idea is mine?
One and most important thing is you as an entrepreneur having the ability to identify within you as an entrepreneur that this thing is actually proprietary. You go to a lawyer, most of us lawyers, we don't even understand operationalization of your idea. So you will come to me and I will look at it from a straight jacket point that, oh, this thing, but I might miss components of your idea that you yourself, you know. There are things about the operationalization of what Maurice has come up with that only Maurice knows. So there are components within that thing that even Maurice, he himself, if he can just identify then those components, then it will help even a lawyer when now I'm taking through the registration processes. But more importantly, Carol, why are we registering? Are we only registering for the mere purpose of registration? The reason why we register is because we have identified that within this component of what we are doing are things that have potentials to grow economies. What Morris has put up, actually, if I was to advise Morris, Morris has come up with an entire new industry. The problem is the gentleman is not even aware. So the gentleman is trying to position what he has come up with within market systems that already exist. So at that moment, he will always come second, and that's why actually he's very much susceptible to theft. But he has come up with a new idea, a new technology that has put together, has the potential of putting in place an entire new industry.
Okay.
So the beginning point, Carol, is with the entrepreneur themselves.
Okay.
Yes.
Looking at some statistics that I saw when I went through the Kenya Industrial Property
Yes.
Institute, that there are only 4 patents granted on average each year
Yes.
to Kenyans. The
Yes.
rest are granted to foreigners.
Yes.
Does that raise maybe doubts on the status of Kenya's innovation as Kenya's as an innovation hub?
That's a big word, doubt. Eh? No, it doesn't raise doubt. What it points is the level of ignorance that entrepreneurs have at the marketplace. And I'm telling you, this level of ignorance, whether from an emerging entrepreneur or established organizations that have not even identified their business processes are proprietary. So actually, foreigners, when they want to invest in Kenya, when they wish to expand their market reach into the African continent, more often than not, they audit their own proprietary aspects. And that's why if you go to the KIPI registry, you'll identify that most of them proprietary materials are actually owned by foreigners. Yes, Carol.
But at what point do you know like your business is viable? Because you're saying he started with 5,000.
Yes.
Right now it's a 70 million worth company.
Yes.
Yeah? At what point do you say now this business now is viable?
If I was to have a conversation with Morris and he's valuing it at 70 million, I can actually tell you that thing is worth 100 bill. 100 bill. Because there are things that just from watching what he was going on, there are things that I've identified from just that component that gentleman can leverage upon. Intellectual property is the enabler for growing entrepreneurship. And any entrepreneur out there who has not yet identified their forms of intellectual property, 9 out of 10 they're going to lose. Because if intellectual property is a resource, it is an asset. So moving forward, the most important component in entrepreneurship is whereby as an individual, as an entrepreneur, someone who is coming up with new products, someone who is coming up with new services, new solutions that we are coming up with, then I need to identify that in these things that I'm putting out there, Carol, there are components that have potentials to put in place new industries.
Okay.
That is what we are lacking.
But then again, how do you test? Because yes, he went with his idea.
Yes.
He went and went all the way.
Yes.
He invested his millions of shillings
Yes.
into it. Then when do you know that this is the right time? And also, how do you know that this business is viable before I make such huge investments?
From the onset, from the very onset. The other day, a gentleman, a friend of mine, shared with me patents, registration statistics from China. And China is actually leading the world in owning and registration of patents. Because from the very onset, an entrepreneur sets out to venture into the field of entrepreneurship. Then you're operating from this concept that I have something that the market doesn't have. From that onset, it's incumbent upon an entrepreneur to take notice of those components within that service or within that product or within what you're trying to create at the marketplace that are proprietary.
Okay.
So in answering you is from the onset.
Okay.
Yes, Karen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Omuga, for coming to us.
Thank you.
I wish we had more time to continue with this conversation.
Thank you.
But time is not on our side. But thank you again. Now, on the other end, I'm actually joined by Sarah with the latest from the world of business.
Thank you very much, Caroline Jenga, for that. Now let's take a look at business news. Good evening. My name is Sarah Adam. It's time to take a look at business news. Now, on to our top story. The merged entity formed after the consolidation of the NIC and CBA Bank has been listed at the Nairobi Securities Exchange as NCBA, floating over 700 million shares to the market. The merged entity will trade at the NCBA at the NSE. NIC's group issued and paid up shares capital stood at 3.5 billion, comprising of 703.9 million